Today in the Owner Suite, I'm joined by Corey Fick, the founder of Show Your Slabs, a new way to display sports cards that has turned into one of the fastest growing new businesses in the sports card hobby.
You've been invited to the Owner Suite, where we get down to business with the movers and shakers in trading cards, NFTs, rare collectibles, and other alternative assets. Click the subscribe button so you can keep coming back. Now welcome Geoff Wilson, the sports card investor.
Hello and welcome to the Owner Suite, and I'm excited today to present to you Corey Fick. He's going to be joining us in the suite to tell us the story of how he launched a startup into the sports card hobby that has been growing extremely quickly. But here's the interesting thing. He had no background in manufacturing, no background in really what it is this company is creating. But he self-taught himself. He figured out how to do it, built his own prototypes, created relationships with manufacturers, and got a brand new product off the ground to great early success. So this is going to be a fascinating story for any of you out there who have ever thought about starting your own product, starting your own business, or maybe you already have a business and you're thinking about doing something new within it. Hearing Corey's entrepreneurial journey and how he rolled up his sleeves and got that done, it's some really interesting, inspiring stuff. So it's going to be a great conversation today, and a conversation that is brought to you by my growth agency, 352.
At 352, Geoff and his team work with growth stage and enterprise companies to drive new revenue. They're experts at bringing your business to new customers and markets, building and launching digital products, and pioneering new ventures. Learn what they can do to grow your business by visiting growwith352.com. That's growwith352.com. 352. Let's do what's next.
Corey, welcome to the Owner Suite.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be on.
Absolutely. And this is going to be a great story for anybody out there who's thinking about starting their own venture, starting their own product, or just doing something a little bit different, because you've gone through this entrepreneurial journey. You're in the midst of it right now. You've recently launched your company, a bunch of new products, and you're having some early success here, which is wonderful. So there's a lot to dig into. I'd first like to start by just kind of learning a little more about your background. You know, where are you from? Where were you born? Where did you go to school?
So I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. I actually went to Towson High School, and one of my claims to fame is I graduated with Michael Phelps. Now, I have to say, I saw his rookie cards sprawled all over his house when he was coming up, and if I would have only known what I know now, I would have put a couple in my pocket or gotten him to sign a couple. But no, so I graduated Towson High School, and then honestly, I went right to work. I started and I actually worked all through high school. I did a kind of work study program where you leave, you leave school at noon, but you go to work, and you can't, like, it's checked up by the professor who runs it, and they teach how to balance, books for work and all the stuff that I truly think should be more focused on in schools. Is luckily what I was able to get at my high school. So
you think having the, kind of the hands-on work experience more integrated into the school, you feel like that's like such an important lesson learned, it sounds like.
It is for me. And now don't get me wrong, school is super important, and going to college and everything, while it's not for everybody, there are people it is for. Me personally, I could never, I would study a book for hours and it would just be out the door the next day. But if you gave me something and asked me to turn $1 into $2, that I could figure out, and I feel like if you focus yourself early enough, it'll just, propel you. Now, one thing I do miss that I wish I had went to college was for the connections, right? To get out of my own little bubble, to get out of the state, to get, but I don't, I'm not in a huge college debt, and I'm not, working a 9-to-5 just to pay that back.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for that. And now you're the captain of your own ship as well, which we'll get to in a minute. But coming out of high school then, so you had some work experience coming out of high school. What did you go on and do next?
So I actually started my own another business that I still currently run. So I'm actually captaining two ships, as it were. But so let's see, right out of high school, I started working for my uncle's law firm. And I was working, just gophering whatever. I'd go to the courthouse and file documents. I'd go, and I was in charge of his storage locker, which was 10 by 10 storage lockers in a storage unit full of files, bottom to top. And you couldn't keep this stuff organized if you were the best organized person, and I'm certainly not. So out of that, I thought, well, this is interesting. Like, I'm spending summers here trying to, 17, 18, 19. And then when I was about 21, my best friend, who I had gone to school from 6th grade on to high school, both graduated. He went off to Iraq, and he was hit by an IED in 2006, and was at Walter Reed. And this is like the friend that you have that's like more of a brother than a friend, right? Yeah. And sorry, I get just talking about it, but so I was trying to figure out a way I would work, right? But I needed to go to Walter Reed every 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. I mean, and when I mean stepped on an IED, had a 4% chance of making it out of Iraq alive, right? Both legs gone, fingers, arms, the whole nine. And so when I started the company, I thought, well, my uncle was super, understanding that I worked for, right? He wouldn't have cared. He would have just written a paycheck anyway, but I'm not somebody who takes, I want to work for what I get. So I was like, well, how can I make my own hours or work for myself? And one of my thoughts was, these files are arduous to try to keep in a storage locker. Why don't we digitize them? So that's when I started a scanning business, document scanning and management, right? And he was my first client. And my best friend's name is Ryan Major, and the name of the company is Major Scanning. Because I thought, well, not only does it give me the freedom to, I'd work nights because I'd be at the hospital all day, or I'd work whatever it took to not like let him be, thinking that obviously his family's going to be there, but friends are different. Some people can't handle it. Some people can't, changing colostomy bags and all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, it never mattered. I just always looked at him the same. But with that, I guess I started the business because I never wanted him to come out of the military while he would be financially taken care of because of his injuries. I wanted him to have a sense of pride in work, because I knew that's who he was, ever since we were 6th grade, and we would get arguments over it. But so that's kind of where I started the first business. So I was a little long-winded version, but yeah. And it was honestly to get him to be the first, to be my partner in it. It actually never ended up going as far as like for him working, because he made such an unreal recovery that he travels the world, does wheelchair rugby, lives by himself, 2 cars, drives, fully, independent person.
Good for him. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So.
Wow. What a crazy story. I mean,
it's unreal.
I've heard a lot of founding stories before of different ways entrepreneurs have got started with their business. I've never heard that before. Never heard anything quite like that. But what an inspirational moment. And people get started for all kinds of different reasons. And obviously this gave you tremendous inspiration to get started with your own venture. Wow. Absolutely amazing. Certainly glad to hear he's doing well today.
Well, and it also gives you perspective. Sorry, but like, I always tell everybody, when something like that happens to somebody like that, the last thing they want to do is be treated any different, right? And we break each other's, backs, just as we did when we were in 6th grade, 7th grade, high school, whatever. I never treated them any different because of what, and not to say that people would, it's just an instinct, right? You don't know if you baby him, you don't know if you're going to hurt it, or, you know what I mean? And I never kind of did that, but it also taught me that, like, the stuff that we are so consumed and wrapped up and gets us so, upset and emotional, where whether you leave your house in the morning and you drive away and you forget your keys and you're all frustrated. Like, think about when he leaves his house and forgets his keys. He's got to get his wheelchair, break it back down, put it back together, pull it out, get back in it, go back in, come back out. It's just like, if you're full, if again, people have other issues, but that aren't always physical. But I'm saying it just for somebody like me who's been pretty blessed to be healthy and have a good family and everybody behind me. It really, to have somebody in my life like that was just a perspective gained that I don't think I'll ever, can never even, show to anybody except for have you meet them.
Yeah, that definitely does add perspective. And one of the key aspects for entrepreneurs to be successful is you have to have a degree of being even keeled. You have to allow things to roll off your back really, really easily. When I talk to young up and coming entrepreneurs, when I mentor at various startup centers, one of the things I always say is that if business is going well, it's 2 steps forward and then 1 step backwards. And that's if it's going well. If it's going poorly, it's, maybe 1 step forward and then 2 steps backwards or no steps forward at all. Rarely is it ever 3 steps forward and then no step backwards. It normally, you just hitting those setbacks and hitting those times when you hit your head against the wall. That's just part of the game. That's part of the entrepreneurial journey. That's how it works. If it was easy to get whatever you're trying to get launched and into the market and successful, then every single person would be doing it. And the reason why, like, I look at those frustrating moments, when I see those types of moments, I say, well, you know what? That makes the barrier to entry high. That makes it difficult for anyone else to do it and to try to do what we're doing, right? Because we're having to overcome these obstacles. And I'm confident that me and my team are going to do a better job of overcoming these obstacles than others who try to come after us and do the same thing we're doing are going to be able to do. So I use those frustrating moments as motivation. And then you hear a story like your friend and of course what he's going through or what he went through, and you're absolutely right. It puts everything in perspective. And then those moments, those frustrating moments, in perspective are not as big as what could be experienced. But being even keel throughout, I think, is just so important to being a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like, all that said, I have my moments. I'm just able to pull myself out of them faster, right? I mean, you
sure, all of us do. Yeah, I mean, all of us do. I mean, there's certainly, we all have those moments. But as you said, you got to be able to pull yourself out of it. You can't get sucked into it. You've got to look at it as a challenge.
Exactly.
And now it's your job to overcome the challenge.
Yep. A barrier to entry. I love that, because that, to me, that's the way I think about it too. Like, especially with this business, the success we've had in the short period of time can come off to some people as, oh my God, this guy, lightning in a bottle. And I'm not saying I didn't catch lightning in a bottle, but with that said, there's a lot of, like, I drove to Dallas, the first card show, but, because the shipping wasn't working out perfectly. And I drove 22 and a half hours by myself in a rental car to sell a product, because I thought I needed the product there, only to find out we sold a bunch of them and everybody wanted it shipped back to their house anyway.
Right.
So then I'm stuck in Dallas with all this, you know what I mean? And that's nobody, that stuff doesn't get seen, or, it gets documented a little bit, but it's not, and that to me is all the stuff that you keep to yourself, and you go, well, at the end of the day, I know if somebody's going to come and try to do what I'll do, they won't be doing that. So.
And that's such an important entrepreneurial lesson. And that's part of the game. And we've all done it. And we've all been there. You go through, you do those things and you don't know what's going to work, and but you put in the effort, and you make it happen. And then a lot of the things you try aren't necessarily it, and aren't necessarily the right thing, but because you put yourself out there and you're trying, and you've got a lot of different at-bats taking place, it puts yourself in position to then kind of figure it out, hone it in, and then get a really good, strategy together for how you're going to grow and scale. So we've already jumped into talking a little bit about your current business. So let's go there. So Show Your Slabs. It's a we can see behind you there on the screen. You've
Yeah.
got your product right behind you. It's a wonderful way to display your cards, whether they're slabbed, which was of course the original thought behind it, but I now understand you even have, support for
Yep.
like, one touches and that type of thing as well.
The mag. Yep. It's the mag one right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's you came along certainly right time, right place with the growth of the hobby. And a lot of people, there's this interesting convergence, I think, between sports cards and art, and people thinking of sports cards as almost kind of modern day art collecting. I know I look at it that way. Like I personally am proud to display the cards that I own, and would rather have, Michael Jordan cards on my wall than an Andy Warhol painting.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people think of it that way, and your product solves that need. So let's start. Actually, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit more about your product so they have the scope of what Show Your Slabs is?
So what it is a customizable, and some of them non-customizable, acrylic display for graded and ungraded sports cards. And the way it works is it's one piece of 1/2 inch acrylic, and this is the customizable model. So you can, you can either personalize it for yourself, or you can make it let the cards be the art. And the way it works is we have a special tool that it comes with, and it has a small strip of what it's called nano gel that kind of just keeps the top intact. And then it actually mounts right behind the cards. So when it's on the wall, it's seamless. You can't see any hardware, any screws. But yeah, to me, I mean, and then obviously we have the model that's behind me. That's just, it's literally letting the cards speak for themselves. And then we also have the for either a card's not worth grading, it just means something to you personally. Like this card, perfect example. This card, maybe $1 in a dollar bin, but Jordan dunking to me is iconic. Like I want that on my wall. I don't care. I'm not overly consumed with the dollars and cents of all of it. For me, the graphic means a lot. Now, don't get me wrong. One day I'd love to own a Jordan, a Fleer rookie, but honestly, the reason I'd love to own it is because the card is so iconic, and the card is the picture on it is so unbelievable. That they captured him like just in the middle of a dunk like that. But so again, and what we did with these is the way you either customize them or you don't. But we also think that there's a big, like you said, the art, right? And one card is great, one card is art. But we like to say we provide the canvas for your artwork. Now, obviously, you're not making a card yourself, but you collect and you accrue, and all the collectors around the world, they collect these collections. And whether it's a financial motive, whether it's a collector, you're just a true hobbyist, whether your favorite team, whatever it is, I just think that honestly, it's where this market's going, and it's not going to stop because it is art. And to me, just like you said, I'd rather have 5 Fleer Jordans and a couple LeBrons than an Andy Warhol or a Jackson Pollock or anything like that. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you come up with the idea for this? Originally, you were doing your document scanning company. Is that you still had that going? How did this come about?
So honestly, it was about 3 to 4 months before COVID, and like COVID really shut everything down. Luckily, my document management business was, it's still to this day going. I have kind of one big client, so they weren't too devastated by COVID just from the business that they're in. But I find myself at home a lot more just because you're home and you're doing. So I started watching these Facebook groups of these and Instagram of card breaking, buy a box, get in for this. And I'm always somebody who's interested in the next way to turn $1 into 2, however that is. And I saw sports cards as an option, right? But in reality, I'm a collector more. Like, yeah, the money is good, but honestly, so it's the funniest thing. I got into a break, a 3-team break where you buy one spot, you randomly get 3 random teams, and it was 18-19 Prism Luca year. And this will show you how long ago it was. It was $110 a spot. So a lot of people may not know what that means, but you do. It's the first one I'd watched these things for, kind of just stalking in the background. Like, how does this work? They send money, pay you, and they're just going to send you the cards. So I finally one Saturday was hanging out and I just said, screw it, I'm going to get a spot. $120, sent the guy, the money through PayPal. Ended up hitting the number 1 spot, getting the Mavericks. A Luka Prism rookie was in there, and at the time that was the card. I mean, it still is, but that card particularly. So here I am going, I turned $120 into $1,200, $1,500, because I've already graded it a 10. It didn't even matter. Like, in my head, I already thought it was a 10.
Sure.
Which that's what they don't tell you, right?
Right.
But anyway, I sent the card out for subbing, came back a 10, and I held this card in my hand, and I thought, I wouldn't sell this card for $2,000. I'm hooked. I'm watching Mavericks games now from Baltimore. We don't have an NBA team, but so I'm watching Mavericks games. I got a Kawhi Genesis, came back a 10. Even if it came back a 9, I'm now a Kawhi fan and a Luka fan. And, it's almost like fantasy football or fantasy whatever basketball. You're picking players. So then just my personality, I'm somebody who, and this drives my wife nuts, like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. But I always look for something. When I'm looking for something that I want to purchase, I attempt to build it first, or I attempt to overhaul something and make it better than whatever the situation is. Again, this will lead you to like changing your oil in the middle of the winter and covered in oil, and you saved yourself $5. But this time I had the cards and I thought, well, let me look around. There was absolutely nothing, that was personal. Everything was just so like, here's a cabinet, put your cards in it. Here's this. And it was the Saturday after I got that sub back, I went to Home Depot. I thought, well, man, it'd be cool to have your own slab. And to be quite honest, I'm past my prime of ever, being on a sports card. So I thought, well, why couldn't I have a slab of all my cards? Right. And I bought 3 pieces of plexiglass, hand cut them, put them all together, got kind of the idea out of my head, and then ran it by a couple of people in the hobby that I break with. And they were like, man, that could be pretty cool. And it went through a couple iterations, but of, different design, different processes and all that. But here we are.
Now, did you have any manufacturing experience professionally before you attempted to do this?
I did not. And I will tell you, what you're doing on YouTube is how I learn everything. And I think that's why, YouTube could be the greatest platform for self-teaching and learning. I mean, honestly, I'd rather have I have a 4.5-year-old. I'd rather have him go half school for structure and half YouTube for learning, because there's nothing you can't learn on YouTube. And not to say that I learned manufacturing on YouTube, but I'm a very handy person. So I understand how I understand how to build things, and I understand what processes are out there to build. So I know routing obviously is a thing. So I just literally looked up my local shop. I looked up plastic company. And then the first guy, so I've been through 3 manufacturers. The first 2, I don't think really took me seriously. And I would pay for everything I would get done. It wasn't like, oh, we have a little faith in you, let us, figure this out. And I just wasn't getting calls back because I was like getting orders and interest. And I would call and be like, hey, I really got this design, I want to get it done. And I wouldn't hear back. And then I ended up, the one company that I was with was just a sign manufacturer kind of. So I ended up finding out who they got their plastic from and their supplier. And I went directly to them. And I I couldn't be happier. They're nationwide, but it's just they're very accommodating. They're local in Baltimore, and so I get to keep it made locally, and I can really design stuff. And it's also funny too, because the head fabricator has been making sneeze guards for the past 8 months, when this started, and he was like, oh my God, it's not finally something else other than, a sneeze barrier. Yeah. And that's kind of what, and like I said, YouTube and just what YouTube mainly for what questions to ask, right? Like how to get the lowest prices, or what to negotiate, or what's not worth negotiating, what's your time worth, that's really kind of how I picked up on it.
Yeah, there's a great lesson there. And that is that so many of the questions people have, that when they're thinking about maybe starting a new venture, starting a new product, a lot of times people have these questions that kind of hold them back. There's fear. People have fear about the unknown and the idea of starting your own thing. People are fearful that, oh, I'm going to have a knowledge gap. I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do that, or I don't have a mentor who can help me. And as you said, a lot of those answers can be found by just doing research and by reading and asking questions online, even to online communities, whether it's Facebook groups or Quora, or any of these online sites. But YouTube, as you said, can be an excellent resource for finding videos and from people who have already done these types of things. Very, very educational. There's a lot you can figure out if you're willing to take the time to research and to do your, to find what's out there.
Yeah. And again, I think that like I'm somebody who I get into stuff, and a lot of times, I kind of put my foot all the way on the gas and then I temper it back, right? And it's funny because when I had my son, and his second birthday party was a power. My wife's like, let's do a Power Wheels party, the little cars around, and of course, like I can't just let it go at that. So I bought 10 Power Wheels for $50 a piece. They didn't work. Rewired all of them. Put tool batteries as the and learned all this stuff on YouTube. Put tool batteries and we literally had a party for him that was in our, we have a pretty big backyard. We had a whole racetrack set up, and it was just a crazy like kids. And it's funny with little younger ones when you learn that kind of business, and that I actually thought that could be a pretty cool business. Like you and I started it kind of, you go like drop them off to people's families or drop them off for parties, but I thought probably be an insurance nightmare.
So clearly you're a handy guy hearing these stories. And I know that helped you, kind of figure this thing out and get it off the ground to begin with. At what point did you start to realize like this may be more than just a fun, a fun way to make a few bucks, but this could actually truly be a viable business with a ton of demand for what you're doing?
It was honestly very quick. And I know, a lot of times you hear stories of companies getting developed, and they're like, and a mark of success is, we've built up this in 5 years and 2 years. But with the age of the internet, it's kind of, everything's kind of accelerated because you have such a bigger reach. And I'll be quite honest, it was one of those things where as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is freaking cool. Like that. And I'm not somebody who blows smoke up. Like, I don't think that, I don't hype stuff up knowing that it's not, or just, I'm a generally cautious person as far as what I would put out there. And, it really has to be a good functioning product, but also just look cool. Right. And honestly, as soon as I got this thing to market, it just took off. And I knew that it's like I've always thought like, man, there's got to be something, and obviously a lot of it's dumb ideas and they get kicked down really quick or just not possible. Right. But this one was kind of like that. But then my fear was like, okay, this thing's taking off like a rocket ship. Well, what if the engine blows out of the back? Right. Because your business is only good as your back end fulfilling it, and so that was kind of one of my biggest fears, and why I didn't, totally blitz the market as far as I never pre-sold anything like a lot of companies do Kickstarters and stuff. I didn't want to pre-sell it because I didn't want there to be an issue at manufacturing that I couldn't foresee, right? And not deliver the product on time, because I think you only get one chance to make a first impression with business. And, you know, while you don't have to be 100% perfect, you got to be in the 85 to 90% when you first come out, right? There's going to be hiccups and there's going to be stuff that's out of your control. But I think that, you know, it just, I saw it taking off, and I thought to myself, damn, well, here we go. I'm in for the ride. So whatever it takes, I'll do it. And it's been a lot of late nights, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on the immediate success. A lot of businesses don't have that fortune. It takes, you know, it takes some time for them to kind of figure things out and find the right combination of things that's going to cause them to go on and grow quickly and be successful. In your case, you launched into a very hot market with a product that there was a lot of need for, even though people didn't necessarily perceive the need until they saw your product. Once they saw it, it resonated with them, obviously. So that incredible growth story, but I'm sure it hasn't been totally smooth sailing. What's maybe the biggest challenge that you've encountered thus far, and how did you have to overcome that?
Well, and so that's it, right? It all sounds, again, like easy peasy. This is great. And part of me just going back to that part of like why the success has been, you know, this quick is because honestly, I was so worried about the market that I was in not holding up, right? The sports card market. Nobody had seen this growth and nobody had seen this explosion. And I, you know, I was in sports cards when I was little. I saw all the junk wax stuff and this, and nobody's seen anything like it. So I thought, well, here I got a little bit of window. I really have to push if I'm going to. But it certainly hasn't all been easy. And it's been a process where you kind of learn and you go through, like, I think my biggest, you know, fear is scaling on the back end, right? I think we've proven that the product that people want it. I think there's a need for it. I think there's even a bigger need, larger than just a collector. But I think, you know, the back end, one of my biggest weaknesses, and I'll tell anybody this, is I not that I don't delegate well as far as telling somebody what to do, I just don't let it go. And so, you know, while I need to have people doing stuff for me to help my business grow, I'll just do it myself. You know, I'll just spend hours and hours and hours and hours. And sometimes it starts to take a toll on you when you've traveled and you got to come back and, you know, cut gel tabs for every pocket, which, you know, I'm still working on. So I guess scaling is my biggest fear and kind of biggest obstacle to overcome. But I have brought on partners, and I've been very direct with them that I'm not good at this. So this is why, like, it's funny when you get investors that want to be a part of it, right? But you also get investors that are just money, and money's great and money does help grow. But I turned down a lot of it because I didn't want anybody who wasn't in the hobby. You can find money if you have a good product, but to find a partner and to find somebody who can fulfill a need that for you while also being an investor, you very few companies are that fortunate, and we were to be, you know, and but yeah, I think that's going to be my biggest hurdle, and I'm quickly working on that now.
Yeah, well, the one challenge that hands-on entrepreneurs have is the tactics that work for you in the early stage, which is you rolling up your sleeves and just pushing hard as can possibly be to get things done, which is what you did. Those tactics can actually be the opposite of what's needed from you if you're going to scale your company beyond yourself and you're going to scale your company up to a larger size. Because then what you've got to do is you got to figure out how to delegate. You got to figure out how to bring other team members on. And it can't be you pushing everything forward. And it can't be you being the driving force anymore. It's actually got to be them. And it's got to be, because that's the only way you can scale it beyond you. And you've got to figure out how to kind of step back and take a little bit more of a, take a leadership role, but not a day-to-day hands-on execution role. And it can be a challenge if you've got the personality type that you do, which I do as well, which is very much a roll up the sleeves and push hard to get this done personality type. It can be a challenge to learn how to delegate, but that's going to be critical if you're really going to scale.
Yeah. And honestly, like I've watched a lot of your videos and stuff, and some other business guys, and that's kind of the biggest thing that, but they also, I think I'm making those right steps and bringing on people, right, that can make those, help function and make those decisions, because I feel like it's almost like you're pushing a snowball up a hill, and that snowball is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's only, you're not going to be able to push it yourself before that thing just gets so big that it starts rolling back down, and that's what kind of keeps me up at night at some points. But I've also leaned on a lot of people that I have family that have been in kind of manufacturing and packaging and stuff like that. So I've started to lean on them, to help me out and kind of just say, look, you don't have to do every display. You don't, but I don't, like, if somebody just doesn't care, I just have this daunting fear that people don't care like as much as I do about the end product. Right. And I know there are people like that, because I was one of those people. I mean, I grew up working for other people. I didn't take pride in what I was doing. So I just have to find those right people and just be very selective about it, I guess.
It's true. It's true. If you can find employees who are passionate about what you're trying to achieve and believe in the mission, and it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, ultimately you want employees to take ownership. Ownership is the big word that I always use with my team is, hey, I want you to take ownership of this. I need you to own this particular area, because to me, if you can have employees who build an ownership mentality around whatever piece of the company it is that you've plugged them into, that they're needing to run, that ownership mentality is all about thinking above and beyond just the day-to-day of what the tasks that are required of them are and how to get those tasks done. But it's looking at the bigger picture and saying, hey, are there things we could be doing and how we're doing these tasks that could make us better overall, that could improve our efficiency, that could make our operations stronger? Are there ways that are there gaps that I can fill elsewhere? Are there ways that I can contribute to the overall mission of the company? And if you can put together a group of employees that, especially on your leadership team, who can exhibit that type of ownership, then it makes it way easier as the founder, as the entrepreneur, to allow your team to run with it and to allow them to take it to new successful heights.
That's actually great advice, and I honestly am going to write that down actually, because that's kind of I'm not even kidding you, because that's kind of the thing. Like, how do you put the carrot in front of the stick, but make that person feel like it's not just a day-to-day job, when maybe it is. But honestly, I think that's kind of that's what I'm learning, right? And what you said is kind of what because I've started to interview people, right, to try to help me take over the back end and run the getting my displays from point of sale to the person's door. And I think that's kind of what I've been looking for, like how to structure the question, right? Like, to the person, do you want to can I trust you to take over this? Right. And then let that, and, kind of bring them in, have them shadow me, but then go, look, this is all going to be on you. Mm-hmm. Or I want you to run this successfully. I want you to be a part of this. And one thing I do think that I have gone with me, for me, is I have a cool brand, right? I have people that want to, it's not like I'm selling calculators, I'm in a cool market. There's, a lot of people, and there's a lot of influencers involved in the whole thing. So, and there's a lot of cool, but again, I think that really will stick with me as far as like empowering other people to not be the owner of the company, but to be the owner of whatever their task is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, ultimately, as a founder, the ideal thing you want to be able to achieve is to have a team around you where if you never came back into the office again, if you just left one day and you were not there for months, that operation would continue to grow, continue to progress, and continue to thrive, because the people who you put in place take ownership, they're empowered, and they care passionately enough, and obviously have the knowledge and the expertise as well to be able to continue the mission, and also clarity of mission. They have to understand what the mission is. They have to be clear on where you're going and what you're trying to achieve, and then feel that internal ownership of it. But that's the ultimate success, for you to be able to step away and know that the team is going to continue to not just manage while you're gone, but actually progress the organization and thrive while you're gone.
Yeah, all I can think is how this thing would plummet if I left it today. But
and that's okay. I mean, that's,
yeah, that's where you start. Yeah, you can't start there. So
it can't start that way. I mean, it always starts with the founder, and what the founder's doing. That's perfectly natural, and totally fine. But of course, 2 years from now, you don't want it to be that way, right?
yeah,
So you got to
hope
transition from the today state to the future state, and the future state needs to be one where you got the right people that take that ownership.
Yeah,
and it's also important that you have a very well-defined vision for the future that you can convey to them. And of course, the vision can change over time. It can morph over time. It doesn't have to be set in stone. It shouldn't be set in stone, but you should have a vision for, what you think is possible and where you would love things to go. And so I'd love to hear, based on where you sit today, what is the vision with Show Your Slabs? Like, how big do you think this could become? Where do you think this could go? What's next for you?
I mean, I honestly don't see, when I started this, I do always think a little bit bigger picture, and I think of, where things could go, in the future as far as just a display business. But I truly think that this business could be a $5-10 million a year revenue stream. And the reason I believe that is because we are attempting to take the collecting of sports cards and turn it into the art that I personally believe it is, right? I think that you will start to see our displays in places where you would not ultimately think, but when I, say those places, you would go, oh, that would make sense, as in stadiums. Everywhere that there's memorabilia, I want to show your slabs. Because when you go to right now, it's cool to go see an autographed, sport or jersey, or this card was, or this jersey was worn this day in an NBA stadium. But I think there's room, and I honestly think that not only with the art aspect of it, but I believe that in the hobby that I'm in, and in the sports card industry, it's honestly now an industry. There's so much was put into the card part of it, right? How the grading, who's doing this, what's X and Y, and nobody really looked at like the back end. So like how stuff is sold, how stuff is tracked. Now you are somebody who did see that. So you started Market Movers, and you started Sports Card Investor, and you saw that while all this rise is going on with the sports card market, there are inherent needs inside of it that could make it so much better and so much more functional and so much easier, right? And I think that our displays can be the vehicle to ultimately help the commercial side, help the sales side, but really and truly, I want I want sports cards to be more mainstream and seen as art pieces to, you know, and it's not, and you can mix them with memorabilia, or you can mix it with this, but like, I think that when you look at the cool thing about our displays is you look at it and it's almost like taking 50 pieces of art and putting it all together. And you look at each one and you think, wow, look at that one. Wow, look at that one. You know, look at that autograph. Look at that piece of jersey over there. And I think that that's how we get to a mainstream, you know, staple as to where you go into a stadium again and see all this stuff. And it's just, it really brings it all together as art. And I don't see it stopping at just cards. It could be comic books. It will be comic books. It will be coins. You know, I think that people's collectibles have been kind of shelved, and there are creative people out there that, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it when I see other, you know, displays that are home built or whatever. I think it's cool, but I think there's a uniform way to make collectibles really the art form, taken into the art world and the modern art that directions they're heading.
Yeah. And the more you are successful at doing that, the more mainstream, as you said, it will continue to make sports cards. One of the cool things about really what we're all doing, whether it's a content creator like myself or a software data provider like we obviously do here as well with Market Movers, or whether it's a company creating displays such as what you do, or any of the other many aspects of the hobby, is collectively, if we're all individually successful, then collectively we're all raising awareness of the hobby, and we're all bringing more people into it and giving more people exposure to it together. And just, you know, if you're successful at getting your slab displays into stadiums and more people see them there and say, wow, look at that, that's really cool, then that's going to be more people getting into sports cards, getting interested in sports cards. So it's just a way for each of us to lift each other up. So I'm definitely very hopeful for you. And that's awesome stuff.
Yeah. And it's great synergy for all of us, right?
Sure.
Again, I think, you know, especially in the sports card market, right? There's a lot of talk about ups and downs and swings, and if it's going down, and there's going to be a lot of cards coming back, you know, from the grading services that were sent over. So there's going to be an abundance of them. And I think what our displays do is give that collector the reason to keep, right? The reason to hold, the reason to enjoy, as opposed to the reason to buy for X and sell for Y. Now, I understand some people are in it to more, but, you know, in the card more than that. But a lot of times, you know, if you're grading it yourself, you're not necessarily into it for too much. It's after the fact, but still. And I think, you know, if we get into a stadium, or, you know, I'll say when we get into a stadium at some point, it will just be the stadium isn't going to buy it because they think, you know, this card's worth 500 and that card's worth 1,000. They're buying it and it's done. It's off the market. You're not, you know, they don't care about value. They want the art, which is truly what I see it as, is, you know, and obviously there's a price for everything. You know, I wouldn't sell any of my slabs. Now, if you said, I'll give you $1 million for all of them, I'd give you all of them. But, you know, general pricing, like for me, I don't necessarily buy to flip. I buy to collect, and I buy to keep. And that's kind of, you know, because I truly just think it's more than just a card.
Yeah. Really, really good stuff. So Corey, to anyone listening who's interested in perhaps purchasing one of your displays, or at least finding out more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yep. You can check us out at www.showyourslabs.com. We have all of our options available up there, and more coming. And then on Instagram at showyourslabs. If you DM us, you'll likely get me. That's one thing that I need to stop doing, but or delegate, as we talked about. But for now, yeah, you DM me on Instagram, you'll talk to me directly. And but again, www.showyourslabs.com.
Corey, this has been great. I appreciate the conversation. Hopefully a lot of folks out there got some good entrepreneurial takeaways and nuggets, or if nothing else, They now know a great way to show their slabs, and hopefully they'll check you out. Corey, thank you so much for joining the Owner Suite.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us in the Owner Suite. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed the conversation and leave a review to help spread the word. Follow Geoff on Twitter and Instagram at Geoff352. And check out Geoff's growth agency, 352, at growwith352.com. See you next time in the Owner Suite.